It's mission debrief time. What's going on, guys? Dave here with Off Grid. I'm into backpacking, hiking, camping, and gear. And if you haven't seen my TCT series or trip video, then you're not going to really have a frame of reference here. So head on over and check that out and come right back. But today is going to be a debrief. I had to do a debrief. Last one I did was on my Channel Islands trip, probably. So it's been a minute since I've done a debrief video, but there was a lot that was kind of going on with this trip, so I felt like another video was kind of needed to help break everything down. So I'm going to break it down into 3 different parts today. I'm going to talk about the trail, how it was constructed, how I liked it, what I liked, what I disliked, things like that. So the trail overall, and then I'm going to get into my gear successes and failures because I was actually testing out a bunch of new gear on this trip, so I'm going to tell you all about that. And then the last section here is going to be why I did not end up, well, spoiler alert, why I didn't end up completing the whole TCT trail and why I had to kind of bag it a little bit early. So let's get right into it here. The first section I'm going to talk about is going to be the trail. So without getting into crazy detail, I think that the trail overall was pretty well constructed. The first section of the first day that I was on was very well constructed. It was mostly uphill, but they had a lot of switchbacks and looked really good. Didn't really care for Blackjack Camp, but had a lot of gains and a lot of good switchbacks on that first day. The second day, I went from Blackjack Camp all the way over to Lone Harbor and had a quick pit stop at the airport after the first couple of miles. That day was pretty easy, a little bit harder on the joints because it was mostly downhill getting to Lone Harbor campsite. And that one was about 8 miles, so it was a lighter day than the 11 that I put in on the first day. And overall wasn't as bad. And then the third day I thought was the worst by far, and I'm assuming that if I had finished it, then the last day would also be somewhat similar. But the third day rather was it's like the switchbacks basically disappeared. I have no idea where they went, and there were a couple stretches there where it just looked like the hillside went straight up. So that kind of really stunk. The only reprieve there was that it was mostly on the coast, so I was getting a lot of that coastal breeze, which was really nice. So that last day was about 6 miles and about 1,200 feet like straight up, I think, within the first 2.5 miles. So again, the Blackjack campsite, as far as like the campsites go, I think that one stunk, had a ton of condensation. The humidity was pretty high at that camp, and there was no views at that camp either. It's more closer to the center of the island, so you're not really getting any kind of like breathtaking ocean sweeping views there. And then the other 2 campsites were amazing, and I'm also assuming the one that I didn't get to, which was Parsons Landing, was pretty much the same, in that they're all pretty much like right on the water, so they're pretty amazing. So the other campsites were pretty awesome. All right, let's get over into the gear failures and successes that I have for you today, because there are quite a lot of them. The failures, and I got a bunch of the gear here that I can show you guys. The first of which is this thing right here. So I ended up bringing this tiny little scoop for a chocolate/MCT drink that I ended up bringing so that it could fit into like a standard, this is just an example but not the one I brought, of like a smart water bottle. So as you can see here, like the diameter kind of fits here, but the scoops that you have for any kind of protein powder, if you've ever seen them, are quite a lot. So I had to basically do this like 40 times to like get it into the water bottle. It's kind of stupid, but I wanted something that would fit the diameter of a standard water bottle, which this fits the bill, but I've since found a replacement for that, so looking forward to getting that in and making that a little bit easier. The next failure, believe it or not, is one of my latest additions, and I recently did a video on this as well, which is Gossamer Gear's The One Tent. I wouldn't say that this is a complete failure, but it definitely makes it more into the failure camp rather than the success camp, and the reason for that is for a couple of different reasons. The first of which Isn't a huge deal, but kind of speaks to the overall craftsmanship of the tent. I had one of the toggles for the tie backs on the main door, like closest to my head, almost ripped completely off after like the first night that I was there. It happened during the first night that I was there. I didn't even really make it a day out in the field before that almost completely ripped off. It still hasn't completely ripped off, but I have to end up like sewing it together. Not a huge deal on that one. One of the biggest problems with this one is that it's a condensation machine. I mentioned in blackjack camp we had like 70 to 80% humidity. I woke up the next morning and I literally had buckets of condensation both on the inside and the outside of the tent, and it doesn't really do a good job at shedding that condensation on the inside of the tent. So I had a little Swedish chamois with me and I was wringing that out like 10-15 times to try and get all the water out, and I was still soaking my gear on the inside of my tent. So a decent miss for this tent. It really depends on the type of condition that you have to bring this in, but wasn't thoroughly impressed with the tent. The next failure that I can get into, believe it or not, because it was tried and true for me for a decent amount of time. I gotta pardon my reach right here. Get right in front of you guys. Is this guy right here. These are the Darn Tough socks. Lifetime warranty on these guys, merino wool, super plush, a lot of great things to like about them. They last really long. However, and this was the first ever time, but I ended up getting a pretty nasty blister, so I'm gonna apologize. It's gonna look super gross, but I'm gonna throw it up on screen, so if you're a little squeamish, look away. But here's the nasty blister that I ended up getting after a couple days on trail. So for the last I would say the last day on trail, I ended up getting it or forming it. And then I also had a couple other cuts because I think my toenails were a little bit long, so that's kind of gross too. But pro tip on that, make sure that you're cutting every single nail that you have, hands and feet, for that one. So, and I never really had that issue before though. So Darn Tough didn't end up working out for me, and I'm gonna have to find a replacement. I'm gonna tell you about that in a hot second. The next failure that I have here is what was on my shoulder strap, which is this guy here, made by Hilltop Packs, the fine folks over at Hilltop Packs. This is their side shoulder pocket, and I think ultimately the biggest design flaw of this thing is the fact that, so they have this toggle right here that goes around the top, which I think is essential. You need to have like a strap that goes around horizontally, and they don't have anything down here. So what ended up happening was that this was, hitting against me as I was kind of bobbing up and down the trail. So I could have run a piece of cord through this, but it would have made putting stuff into the pocket a little bit harder. And the other thing that kind of stinks about this is they have the two draw cords here, and if you have this top one where the mesh is cinched down a little bit tighter, whatever you try to put in on the back end here is going to make it hard to get out. So I was putting my cell phone in here, and it was really hard to kind of get that out without first uncinching this a little bit to get to it. So Ben hit me up. I have another idea that he already passed on, but I feel like I can make a pretty decent addition to your overall product line on this one. But I'm going to be ditching this one and replacing it with something else that I'm also going to tell you about in a hot second. The next failure, there's a decent amount of failures on this one as well as successes, but it's going to be this one right here. This is the Sea to Summit soap sheets, the Wilderness Wash Pocket Soap Leaves. So they're basically dry soap leaves, and I ended up using this as a last minute ditch of my Dr. Bronner's Castile soap. And while this may be okay for like washing your hands, I was trying to use this to wash my body down and my clothes, and threw like 6 of these things into about a liter of water, and it didn't like soap up really at all, and my clothes didn't really smell that much better from it. So I'm gonna ditch these to the curb for a body wash and a clothing wash, but still might be good for washing your hands. And then the last failure that I have is going to be by way of sunscreen. So I ended up using this small stick here. This one in particular kind of stunk because it's, it came off on my skin kind of white. This is by Cetaphil, and it's a 50 SPF. I had another one that doesn't, make you look like a ghost, but The coverage overall on this isn't that great because it's a stick form. So, you know, if you have like something that's more exposed, like near your hair or something like that, or, you know, trying to do your arms would take like forever for something like this. So I did end up getting burned on my face. I'm still kind of healing from that, a little bit on my nose, mostly because I'm swiping my sweat off and everything, but that was also a failure. The next one I'm going to get into is going to be the successes now. And this one right here is the smallest but mighty one here. This is a pair of Hot Lips, and I was using that to drink out of my mug. That worked out really well. The next one here, I'm just kind of grabbing stuff off screen. This is a Soto Windmaster. Used it for the first time. Performed beautifully. Had the piezo ignition that worked really well. The only downside that I would say is I tried to pair this up with my Tokes pot, and I ended up weighing my fuel can when I came back, and it was a little bit high end on the amount of grams used per boil with that setup. I am assuming it's going to be a little bit better with my jet boil stash, but I can get into that into the future on a future video for you know, just time trials and fuel burn, things of that nature. Next thing that I can grab right here for a gear success would be these guys, which are the Noon tablets. I have a couple of different options for electrolytes on the trail, and this one obviously isn't as great because it's a tablet form. You have to break it in half in order to fit it into your water bottle. But you know what? After like a bunch of the other packets from either Keto Vitals or Ultima, I usually like to bring, I threw one of these in and started craving these when I was on the trail and looking forward to these more so than my other options. So the Noon tablets were actually really good. Let's see, what else can I grab for you guys here? One of the ones that I actually don't have with me because they're dirty and they're still in my car would be the Ultra Timp 3s. Now, I know my buddy Brad over at As the Crow Flies Hiking ended up destroying his model. We both got the same sale at REI, and they were pretty cheap, but he destroyed his in about 8 days on the High Uintas Trail, I think over in Utah. I ended up using these for a few days, and I also took them out on a bunch of trail runs to try to break them in, and they're still holding up great for me. So I think overall those were a success. Let me look at some of the other clothing options I have. Again, apologize for kind of sticking my head into the screen there. A couple more. Let me just grab these. All right. For clothing, we've got the Altitude hoodie by Outdoor Vitals. Was really looking forward to wearing this, trying this out, but I was really surprised at how well this worked. Worked great against the sun. I know they're not rated for UPF or SPF protection or whatever, but I never got burned, so it's fine by that. It's ultra light. It's lighter than my Crater Lake hoodie from Mountain Hardwear that I also like. And it's also a little bit more quick drying than that hoodie as well. So this worked out really well. Probably going to talk more about this in the future. The next clothing item here, and I really love it. I wanted to love it, wasn't sure how it was going to work out. Actually, I ended up buying another one just this morning because they had another drop. This is the Senshi Ren hoodie, ultralight mid-layer option, but it was actually decently warm. I had some of the nights get into the upper 40s, I think about 49 degrees. So I did have to slip this on in my tent at night for a couple of the nights, but I was warm in this thing, and even like kind of around camp. So for a summer mid-layer option, this thing is amazing. The next piece of gear I can talk about for a success would be the Sea to Summit Air Light Towel. This is, I think, the large. They also have an XL that I'm thinking about getting, but yeah, this is the large. Worked out great in drying me off, and also was quick drying as well. So, and is decently light. I think this one is right around 2 ounces, something like that. So decently large towel, and it worked pretty well. I was a little worried that, you know, it's just going to become oversaturated really easily, but that worked out really well. The next success, and I was really happy about this one as well, is my Sunblessa headlamp here. I did a first look on this one. Worked great in the field, didn't have any issues with it, didn't have to recharge it, and I used it basically for 3 nights when I was out there. I like all the different modes on this, and it is lightweight, so would definitely recommend that. And then another one that I have for you guys here would be my Sea to Summit Ultra Sil kitchen sink. This worked really well. I was I was washing myself down as well as washing my clothes on this trip, and this worked really well and was also really quick drying. I think this might be the last one for the successes. No, I got a few more actually. I'm trying to go as quickly as possible. This one here is my Adidas visor. I know that the footage makes my hair look freaking crazy, but this worked out really well. Let me tell you, if you have a little bit of hair up top and you're used to cramming it into something like a normal hat here, feeling the breeze in your hair and still being able to shed the sun. I know it sounds kind of silly, and I know I looked goofy on trail, but I really like this, and I'm going to continue using it for my trips. The next piece of gear that was a success was the Nature Hike quilt. This is sort of akin to the Aegis Max, where it's an ultra light. This is kind of viewed as both a quilt and a sleeping bag, because you can open this all the way up, and it's one of the main reasons why I got this. And I gotta say, I was pretty impressed. Again, the temps got down to the upper 40s at night, and I was warm in this thing, so would definitely recommend this quilt. And what else? I think I have a couple more that I can show you here. Weird sound effect. And this is still dirty, but this is my water shoe by just a Chinese company called Metag or something like that. Worked really well. It's sort of like a part sock and shoe combo, but worked really well. Didn't slide off. I had my feet in the ocean with this. Didn't have any river crossings, but works really well. Just in general for a water shoe as well as a camp shoe, just kind of hanging around camp. Woo! Still a lot of dirt on this guy here. You can probably hear all the stuff kind of floating around. It's kind of gross. I really gotta wash those. And then the last thing that I have for the success here is another shoulder strap accessory, but I didn't want to take it off. And that's this guy right here. I didn't show you on the loadout, but I got it on here now. This is Gossamer Gear's bottle rocket, they call it, that goes right on your strap here. And my God, this thing didn't move around at all, was amazing. The bottle is a little bit hard to get in and out. A lot of times I had to use two hands to get it in and out, so I'm not super thrilled about that, but it fits the bottle like a glove. It has an extra toggle that you can throw over the top of a 1 liter, but I was just using a 20 ouncer. Worked insanely well. And then comparing that to the Hilltop packs, this one is a keeper for sure. I have a couple other sections that I want to get into. The first of which is a gray area section, so things that kind of worked, but I still have some reservations about. And then I have another section which is a wish I had kind of gear for some of those failures that were out there. So for the gray area, I'm going to bring this back up. This is actually the gray area right here, and this is the Gossamer Gear Mariposa backpack. Worked decently well. The only issue that I had with it is that, first of all, the top lid here, if you've got a lot of gear in here and have it stuffed, you can't fit a lot into this top pocket right here. It's got a little zipper where you can kind of stash something, but you can't fit anything that's like decently bulky, or even like a quart size Ziploc bag that's full of stuff that some of my toiletries are in. And then the other problem that I have with it, because I took the frame out, maybe the frame would have mitigated that, but the pain that I had in my traps and like in between my shoulder blades was decent on a couple of days when I was on trail. I also don't like the fact that the hip pockets are not super huge, but I love the fact that you can literally do a one-handed zip on the side pockets. So the gray area, first gray area would be the backpack there. And then I think that's pretty much it. That's the only one I'm going to talk about for the gray areas. Let's get into the wish I had pieces of gear for some of those failures. So instead of the sun stick here, I think I'm going to go back to, so originally I ended up using, when I first started out, a very small can. You can get these travel-sized aerosol cans. This is by Banana Boat from Target, I think is where I picked them up. Weighs a little bit more than this, but the coverage on this is going to be a lot better. And for both of these versions, you don't have to worry about like lotion, exploding in your pack. The next thing I wish I had, and I've already, full disclosure, I ended up buying these already anyway. was an umbrella. So, and this is specific to certain trails. So I had a lot of high sun exposure when I was on the TCT, and in this part of the world, the sun is a little bit more killer. There's a lot more exposed sections. So for a while there, I was thinking that the umbrellas were kind of goofy, but I did see one on trail, and I kind of wish I had it. So I ended up picking up one of those. And the next thing that I wish I had instead of the Darn Tough socks here is going to be, and you probably would have already guessed this, and that is the Injinji socks. So I kind of held off on that because I did end up investing a lot of money into at least like 4 pairs of the Darn Tough because I really enjoy them, and I think they're really solid socks. But the cuts and the blisters that I had would have not even have been a factor if I had a pair of toe socks. So I already picked up a pair of Injinjis, so I want to try those out. And then instead of the Hilltop Packs bag, here it is, bring it back up here. Instead of this, I ended up getting Gossamer Gear sells their own side pocket where I can, throw similar stuff that I have in this pocket. It's going to be a little bit more secure riding on the pack because it's specifically made for it. So I wish I had that, and I did end up picking that up as well. And then the last item I want to talk about for gear, kind of rounding it out here, is going to be, I wish that I had a Rology ball, some sort of cork ball, something like that, so that I can kind of roll out certain muscle groups. So a quick shout out, even though he doesn't watch my videos, to Bryce Newbold. I ended up seeing him use his trekking poles to kind of roll out his quads, hammies, and calves, things like that. And I ended up using that, and that worked decently well. So thanks for that. But having a little cork ball doesn't really weigh that much, and would also help get into some of the other problematic areas. Particularly because I bring a foam pad too, so I can use that to really get in there. So I wish I had that. All right, so that rounds out all that stuff. Apologize, this video is going to go a little bit longer today, but I'm trying to fit in a lot of different stuff here. The last section I'm going to talk about is going to be why I failed. That's just what the title that I have for it. And there's a few different reasons for that. A couple of these reasons are going to sound like excuses, but all of it kind of rolled into why I didn't end up making it the full distance. So I only ended up making it about 26 miles out of the 40 or so miles that makes up the trail. The official trail is a little bit under 38 miles, but you have to do town walking to make up that total of 40 that I'm mentioning. It's either 40 or 41, something like that. But the first reason why I failed, for me, I'm going to say that it was logistics, okay? You're on an island. You either have to fly there, or most likely you're going to grab a boat to get there, which means you have to plan the boat when you get there as well as planning the boat to come back. And the last day here, I was budgeting somewhere around, the last leg is about 15 miles. I got there with enough time. You have to book each campsite as well and get to each campsite. So that wasn't an issue of getting to the campsite in time. However, the boat that I had booked was leaving at just before noon the next day, which means in order to fit in the 15 miles, I had to get up somewhere around like 3 o'clock in the morning to make an attempt. And I just didn't feel like doing that. I was like, that's not really enjoyable to me. I don't like night walking for hours before the sun gets up and trying to cram in a lot of miles. So I just didn't really feel like doing that. The good news was that the boat was pretty much right there at that last campsite that I was staying. So I didn't have to worry about like hiking X number of miles just to get the boat out of there. So that was good. The next reason why I failed, in my opinion, was the fact that my feet did get kind of eaten up. And I'm not used to that. I'm not used to blisters. I'm not prone to blisters. I'm not prone to cuts on my feet and things like that. And I had to deal with that this time around. I think I had mentioned before that I don't usually crack into my med kit either. And I had to do that this time around. Luckily, and this is a shout out to my buddy Jared Snackbox over at Outside Comfort Zone, who turned me on to Leuco tape. That stuff is amazing. Stayed stayed where it needed to be. I addressed the blister and used some ointment and stuff like that. So Towards the last day, they were kind of still beaten up and kind of bruised and cut, and like I said, the blister, but I tended to them, and that wasn't that big of an issue. But my toes and my feet were definitely, just feet in general, were definitely hurting and feeling it. The third reason was that, in my opinion, I don't think I was conditioned enough to do 10 plus miles a day. I'd say I'm more of like your average or so backpacker who, you know, just in general, I'm not really super thrilled to do a ton of miles when I'm out there. So my wheelhouse is usually somewhere under 10 miles a day, anywhere from like the 5 to 8 mile range is kind of like my sweet spot. So the first 11 miles on that first day really kicked my butt and got me thinking, like, am I really down for 14 on the last day too? And, you know, it was always kind of in the back of my mind even before I headed out there. All right, another thing that I can throw in here, and this is kind of more of like the excuses category, but I was just coming off of a cold. It wasn't COVID, thank God, but I was coming off of a cold. And the first couple of days, my nose was still, it's like that end of the cold where like you know, your nose is all stuffed and everything. I know it's gross, but like everything starts coming out, all the mucus and everything. So I was blowing my nose like crazy. I still didn't have my lungs back. I was only able to really like do like one road run before I went out there, and I just wasn't really like 100% healthy and up to the task for that many miles. So that sounds a little bit more excusey. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Like I'm kind of throwing an excuse out there, but you know, I wanted to make sure that I felt my best, and I didn't, but I wasn't going to miss the trip anyway. So there's that. And then the other thing that I want to mention here before my last point is, and it's kind of weird, it's kind of a mental game here. So one of the things that I wanted to mention here is that, you know, I was thinking about the last day, thinking about the last 14 miles, and a serious thought came into my head that, well, I'm just going to pop some aspirin or some Tylenol and hit the trail. And as long as my brain doesn't, you know, feel the pain, then I can just push through and go through it. I think that's a topic that I'm going to have to talk about a little bit more in detail in the future, is the fact that we kind of rely on that stuff sometimes, right? And to just forget about the pain so that we can push through and do more miles. And I'm really questioning whether or not we should be doing that in the backpacking space, using that as a crutch. I think, in my own personal opinion, I think you should just be using that stuff to, you know, deal with some of the heavy stuff, and not just deal with the planned stuff, not just deal with the regular trail and trying to push through. So I'm probably going to talk about that more in the future, but I didn't want to rely on that, and that was a serious thought that came into my mind, like, well, I'll just pop some pills, and I feel like you shouldn't be doing that, right? So there's that as well. And I ultimately didn't end up taking anything, so I'm proud of myself for that, but was a little disappointed in myself that I thought about that as a legit option. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention here, and that I've never talked about before on the channel, is I believe that I have a certain medical condition, and I heard another thru hiker use this on the backpacking podcast. I apologize, I don't remember her name, so I'll look her up and throw it up here. But as soon as I heard her mention this, I was like, that's what I have. And it's a condition called POTS, and it's not Pepper Potts from the Marvel universe. I actually don't know what it means. I'll throw it up on screen here too. But basically what it is a condition where your heart beat goes out of rhythm and starts racing really fast. So I had to figure out techniques to try and get around that, and the first day on trail was the hardest for me, and my condition ended up acting up right around lunchtime there too, and got kind of scary for me on trail. So I'm gonna save the rest of the details there, but there was a scary moment that I had on trail, and ultimately I just had to, you know, take a break, drop pack, relax, and just wait until my body got back into a regular rhythm. And then after that point, I really focused on that, and you know, I had a technique where luckily it didn't crop up again, but it is a serious condition, especially when it flares up, and I just have to you know, keep on top of that. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that, just for full disclosure and honesty here on the channel. And that was another reason. All of those things kind of went into and kind of culminated to the reason why I was not able to complete my through hike, I guess, attempt of the entire trail for the Trans-Catalina Trail. But that's going to do it, guys, for this one. I know this is a little bit longer of a video. I appreciate you sticking with me, especially if you stuck all the way to the end. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff. I had a blast when I was out there. Fantastic time. The trail's amazing. I would definitely go back at some point in time, hopefully in the near future, but you never know. I loved it. I loved my overall experience. Had a lot of fun with my gear, testing out new gear, seeing the amazing scenery that was out there, putting in some miles, and also doing a decent trek solo. This is the first one that I put in a decent amount of miles as a solo hike. And I also met some great people when I was out there as well. But thanks for watching this week, guys. Leave your comments down below. I love reading all of them. And remember, if you're headed off grid, make sure you do your research and you make it a safe one. I'll see you guys on the next one.